Hello everyone and welcome to Global. Today we are starting our first episode in our series of Regents review episodes. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to take you through all of this year in around 3 or so episodes of 30 minutes is how I think it's going to play out. But either way, we'll get you through all of it. We'll get you prepared for the Regents. You will do well. Trust me, if you listen to this podcast. And if you do a little more study skills on how to do essays and stuff like that, you will do well. Trust me about that. So we are starting off where we started off beginning this year with the Enlightenment, and we're going through this quickly because we're not too in depth, but some of the things you need to know are who are some of these thinkers and some of the key ideas of the Enlightenment and what happened afterwards. So pretty much first, the Enlightenment was the period in European history when reason was used to understand and improve society. We didn't do it just based off the power of kings anymore. They're actually using logic and reason to figure out why one person should do something to another person. Enlightenment philosophers believe that society could be improved by using a reason, and B, natural law, universal rules that are always true, just things like common sense pretty much. Enlightenment philosophers believe that government should receive authority from the people, not from God, or from really like military conquest or anything like that. Enlightenment philosophers believed in democracy, or government where the people have the say. The important thing to know is that the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment both encouraged the spread of new ideas and the use of reason. And those two worked in tandem, both kind of more philosophically and more scientifically. For example, Galileo Galilei, big in the scientific revolution, finding that the Earth did not revolve around the sun. That's more last year, so that's not why we're starting with it. Some of the key people of the Enlightenment include John Locke. He said all people have natural rights, the right to life, liberty, and property. He said it was also the people have the right to overthrow governments that fail to protect these rights. Baron de Montesquieu said in order to prevent kings from being too strong, he believed that this idea that obviously many governments, if not all really democratic governments around the world use today, kind of separation of powers into executive branches like our President of the United States, legislative, we got the Congress, is our legislative branch with the House and the Senate, and judicial, of course, that's the Supreme Court here in the United States, so that there's a separation of powers and a system of checks and balances. Voltaire believed that everybody, is another guy here, believed that everyone's entitled to freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Rousseau believed that that society is a social contract and agreement in which all people agree to work for the common good of a society. You gotta pitch in if you want your society to be good, which is all kind of what Rousseau believed. This is his main philosophy. Since the Enlightenment, philosophers believed that people can overthrow unfair governments. The Enlightenment helped cause a lot of political revolutions that we will be getting to very shortly. There were European kings and queens who believed Enlightenment ideas and ruled using Enlightenment principles. They were called enlightened despots. So, those are the people who followed those ideas, hopefully trying to make their lives for better. The lives of their people better, anyway. All right, so now we talked about the kind of Enlightenment and the kind of intellectual revolution. Now we're talking about the actual revolution, political revolution. Let's start with the French Revolution. The French Revolution was when the people of France overthrew their king, Louis XVI, and fought for more rights. Some of those reasons why this happened was the French society was divided into 3 estates or social classes. The people of the third estate were mostly peasants, and they were the large majority of the population. They were angry. They had very few rights and paid the highest taxes, even though they had the least amount of money, which is just ridiculous. France was ruled by absolute monarchs. The French people believed that these kings abused their power and denied or took away the rights of the people. The ideas of the Enlightenment inspired the French people to overthrow their unfair king and create a new government that protected their rights. And this was, again, it was spurred by the American Revolution and spurred the idea of a lot of these people. Again, Rousseau is a very French name. Like these things were happening inside France, and France was like, wait, these are all great ideas. Why aren't we putting them into place? And then they thought, hey, we can put them into place. And those revolutions, France and many others soon spread. So the other thing is France was in an economic crisis, and it's very hard to keep the peace when you're in an economic when most of your people are in an economic crisis if you're a ruler and you're still living very lavishly, which Louis XVI was. So he was overthrown. And the revolution began. We began with the Declaration of the Rights of Man. It was a document written during the French Revolution that gave equal rights to the men of France and created a fair system of taxation. The Reign of Terror, this was an event when the leaders of the French Revolution executed thousands of people they believed were loyal still to the king. The Jacobins were the radical group leading this event. Robespierre was the leader of the Jacobins during the Reign of Terror. Some of the results of the French Revolution was that King Louis XVI was executed by the Robespierre and the Jacobins, ending the long French monarchy. The middle class of France gained more power and rights. And after that, Napoleon Bonaparte came along. He was a ruler who came to power at the end of the French Revolution. He expanded French territory by conquering neighboring lands in Europe. By doing so, he made the French people feel a lot of pride in their country that we can do this. We just had a crazy revolution. People were dying, but look, we turned it around, and now we are killing it out there and getting all the land. So this is really cool stuff. So the thing is, the Regents really does focus very thoroughly on the fact that Napoleon was finally defeated in 1812 when he made a big mistake. He invaded Russia during the winter, and the freezing climate of Russia killed thousands of his soldiers, and the same mistake was made by another leader, another conquering leader, in World War II. So we'll tell you a little bit about that in future episodes probably of this podcast series. So yeah, France was not the only place that revolutions were happening. We also saw them take place in Latin America. The Latin American revolutions were the events where the colonies of Latin America, they fought to gain independence from Spain, Portugal, and France. Some of the key reasons for Latin American revolutions were that the government of Latin America, controlled by the Peninsulares, people born in Spain and or Portugal, some of the two conquering countries in that region. The colonial countries in South America were Spain and Portugal. They treated the people of Latin America poorly. Creoles were Europeans born in Latin America. Mestizos were mixed Europeans and Native Americans, and Native Americans, African slaves also demanded more rights. The ideas of the Enlightenment inspired Latin Americans as well to fight for independence and self-government, to overthrow the unfair governments. The American Revolution and the French Revolution also inspired Latin Americans to fight for independence and overthrow unfair governments as well. So, some of the leaders who helped gain independence or self-government for the colonies in Latin America included Simón Bolívar in Bolivia, Colombia, that area. This is more Central America. José de San Martín, Miguel Hidalgo, and Toussaint Louverture in Haiti. Sorry for my bad pronunciation of that. All these men are considered nationalists because they loved their nations and wanted to free them from European control. They wanted Haiti for the Haitians in Louverture's case, and for Simón Bolívar, they want to create kind of a grand kind of Bolivarian state, or however you want to say it, in Central America. Like, they wanted their countries to be built around their identities, and that's kind of what nationalism really is. José de San Martín was a liberator in Argentina, Chile, and Peru, and Miguel Hidalgo led revolutions in Mexico. Alright, so yeah, the attempts largely failed because Latin America has many natural boundaries, such as the Andes Mountain and the Amazon rainforest. They prevent a lot of communication between regions. So these kind of attempts to create a larger Latin America after these Latin American countries, they gained their independence, but they wanted to create a larger kind of one Latin America, one country under one kind of group of people. These attempts failed because Latin America, they had many natural boundaries, so they kind of just broke up a little bit into the shape that they largely are today. So that's kind of what happened in Latin America with those revolutions. So now we turn to the Industrial Revolution. This is happening in the 17 and 1800s. The Industrial Revolution was a change from producing goods by hand to producing goods with machines in factories. Huge deal. It started in Great Britain. It was England to be specific, because it had many natural resources such as coal, iron, tin, lead, and waterways. There's a pretty big one there that are necessary to produce and transport goods. In other words, Great Britain had very favorable geography. Some of the key results of the Industrial Revolution were industrialization, where machines were used to produce goods in factories in a very, very large scale. You had a lot more of a surplus of food, of resources, things like that. And really some stuff you never really even had before. Urbanization, or the growth of cities. People came to urban cities in huge numbers to get jobs in factories. Many cities had severe pollution from the smoke that came out of the factories. There's also a lot of bad working conditions in said factories. People didn't really know how to handle it. The profit motive, especially in capitalist England, was incredibly strong to kind of just get the most amount of money for these factory owners. A lot of times workers kind of got crushed under that boot, which was very, very rough, especially in the early going of the Industrial Revolution. Because workers in factories, they worked in dangerous conditions for long hours and low pay. Young children were frequently hired and abused in these factories. But when there's one push one way, there's a push another way. It's led to the formation of labor unions for the first time. Labor unions are organizations of workers that fought to improve the pay and working conditions of workers by strikes, kind of protests, picket lines, stuff like that. Various other methods of kind of making sure that conditions are better. Those are still obviously in effect today. Very big deal. Their legislation also came out to kind of handle this new boom in industrialization. Governments eventually passed laws that set minimum wage and end child labor, kind of holding these big with the use of their factories, companies accountable to make sure that people were paid and compensated for their labor. Laissez-Faire capitalism began in the Industrial Revolution, the market economy. This was an economic system that was used during the Industrial Revolution and still kind of is in use most of the world today. It was based on kind of the following ideas: businesses and factories should not be owned by, should be owned by individuals, not the government. Business decisions should be made by individuals, and the government should not interfere. Prices should be set by individuals, not the government, based on supply and demand. And yeah, those are pretty much the things. Government should have kind of hands off, no regulation, no interference. It was kind of broadly supported by the wealthier people, the people who had the factories, the people who would like the government really to get their hands off, laissez-faire, hands off, chill, relax. The government kind of being government. They want the government to pretty much be the parent who just lets them as the factory owners get away with anything, and when they want the stuff they want to get away with is pushing that minimum wage lower, hiring more children, just anything to increase the profit. That's because it's kind of the way capitalism works. So as we said before, with the push one way comes the push the other way. And that leads us to Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. These two men believed that laissez-faire capitalism was bad. They argued it allowed greedy factory owners to exploit poor factory workers. They wrote the Communist Manifesto, which is a book that said the following: all of history has been about class struggles, haves versus have-nots. During the Industrial Revolution, the wealthy and greedy factory owners, or the bourgeoisie, were taking advantage of the poor factory workers. The proletariat, so workers, working class versus the owners class, big struggle that has been always supported by some people since at least some part of the world. Communism has been prevalent since this time period. The proletariat, this is what they wanted them to do, is rise up, overthrow the bourgeoisie in a violent revolution, and eliminate laissez-faire capitalism. The proletariat should then create kind of a new society where work and wealth were shared equally, and everyone really kind of just melded into one, where social classes really no longer existed. The ideas of Marx and Engels eventually became the foundation of communism. Countries that became communist, like the Soviet Union and China, were inspired by the writings of Marx and Engels, but often got kind of taken over into totalitarianist directions, which eventually led to their demise. Or in case China was still is a little bit totalitarian today, but in Soviet Union's case, it kind of did lead to their demise. So now we turn from revolutions to nationalism. Nationalism is defined as the feeling of love, loyalty, and devotion to one's country. Someone who feels this love and loyalty and devotion is known as a nationalist. Nationalism usually develops in an area where people share a common language, culture, and history, cultural identity. If we as a population here, the Greeley population, if we were a country, we could kind of bond around the fact that we all go to the same school, we are in the same place most of the day, we do a lot of the same things. That could kind of, if we were a nation, that would make us a lot nationalist. If you get what I'm trying to say there. And there's a lot of events happen during this kind of nationalist period, including the unification of Italy and Germany in 1870 and 1871. Up until 1870, This just sounds kind of crazy, but both Italy and Germany were not yet countries. Instead, they were areas that were divided up into many different states, each with its own government, due to feelings of nationalism, pretty much the feeling that, hey, like we all speak Italian, we all have kind of the same background, we grew up in the same peninsula, why don't we come together? Germany kind of grew up in the same land,